everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Help for HD TV. Today is obviously not the time Help for HD TV would be airing, but it's actually a little bit later on Friday. We have all of our JHD moms with us today who will be speaking for the FDA, and they have agreed to come on and show you guys their talks that they're going to be doing with the FDA, because we know this is a closed session and so many people wanted to be involved in it and they couldn't. So the FDA gave us clearance that we can show these presentations to you guys and we can play. So first, before we start the presentation and you guys see, I'd really like to go through a timeline of Help for HD, because Help for HD made a commitment to the JHD community back in 2015. In 2015, Help for HD asked, why has there never been a juvenile Huntington's disease specific event ever? And no one could answer that. So we decided to hold the very first ever JHD walk. At that time, we raised $26,000. Dr. Kyle Fink's lab is still working every day on juvenile Huntington's disease research. Thank goodness Katrina Hamill and I were able to announce in Sacramento, in which a lot of these JHD moms were there, to see that the NIH, the National Institute of Health, gave a grant to that research. So it was a beautiful start to some really good research.
And Katie, so many moms, you have to let everyone know. You have that up in your brain where I don't, but there are so many moms that came from all over to get together, meet each other in person from all over.
We actually got a private grant and we were able to fly in 14 mothers from across the nation to meet for the very first time in person that had been supporting each other and talking to each other online daily. That was probably the most emotional part about the whole event, was seeing these moms fly in and hug each other for the first time. And then in 2016, we said, why stop? We're going to shoot a documentary. So then we started shooting The Warriors. We flew across the nation for 1 year and we filmed families living with juvenile Huntington's disease. We started filming in 2016. I was released in 2017, and I am very proud and happy to say that we won 18 national film festivals. It was a labor of love. And unfortunately now, except for one, every child in that film has passed away from juvenile Huntington's. They are gone. But we were able to get a lot of theirs on film. And I know the mothers still to this day fight, even though now their children are gone. And that's the most beautiful thing about this community, is that we still continue to fight together.
That documentary is something that's still utilized today, that people request the link to, and it's free. People can watch it all over the world and have watched it all over the world. So I think it's something that's a very important resource for families who are new to JHD, or for educators or doctors, researchers, anyone interested in the disease. It's extremely impactful and educational.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we decided a couple months later to have a movie premiere. We premiered the movie The Warriors, and we had people that came from all over and watched The Warriors, and all of that money funded juvenile Huntington's disease research. And I want to say this out loud: Help for HD has never taken a dime from anything that we have made from JHD. Every single penny has gone back to flying in families, supporting families. We have helped pay for funerals and services for juvenile Huntington's families that could not afford it. We have funded research. Help for HD has never taken an admin penny from JHD ever. And then coming to now, with a lot of these amazing women, we started the very first juvenile Huntington's disease support group. And I think a lot of these moms will tell you it's their lifeline, and that they can have a hard time finding help from anyone but each other, true help. And that is actually something that I would encourage any family, if you have just got a diagnosis or you're new, please come join us the first and third Tuesday of every month and truly find a place and a home to find support and community. And then I think that brings us to the first ever JHD symposium. And that was Help for HD decided families impacted by JHD go to HD conferences all the time, and JHD is not talked about. They may have one session. So we decided that we would try our very best to do a whole entire symposium. And because of COVID, we were shut down. And then a year went by and we were shut down again. And by our third try, that was a charm. We had our very first symposium for JHD in Orlando, Florida on January of 2022. That was pretty cool to see a whole education program specifically for juvenile Huntington's disease. And that brings us to today. We wrote the FDA about 8 months ago and requested a patient listening session on juvenile Huntington's disease. And we were very excited when the FDA wrote back and said that this was something they would be interested in, and they would like to hear more about juvenile Huntington's disease. So Health for HD, we submitted that request. We got a call from the FDA and we went to work right away to find these 7 incredibly strong women that were willing to tell their children's story. I don't want to say they were going to make history, they're going to change history. And so today we are going to pass it over to them, and we are going to let you guys know what they have spent hours and hours working on. You have to understand, these are their children. You can only imagine what they have gone through, having to dig their deepest fears out about their children to be able to present this to the FDA. So I think that if anyone deserves respect and thankfulness, it's us as organizations to these moms for doing this for our community, for our children. So on that note, I am going to start sharing my screen, and we will show you what the FDA just saw by the time this airs about a minute ago. You are going to hear today from individuals who are living all of our greatest fears for those of us in the community that have children at risk. Why? Huntington's disease is often referred to as the worst disease known to mankind. I am here to tell you it has nothing on juvenile Huntington's disease. So why is it our greatest fear? Maybe because it's an innocent child. Maybe because the symptoms are so much more severe in children. Children living with JHD live with symptoms that people with HD don't have to. Symptoms like seizures, dystonia, and dystonic storms like you're seeing in this video, severe sleep disturbance, full body itching, and I believe the most terrifying, severe pain. Or maybe because how fast this disease progresses. If your child is diagnosed, you know the symptoms are coming fast, and you know you're going to have to say goodbye to your child much faster than you would your adult with HD. Or maybe, and I think this may be the number one reason, there's no hope. There's no therapies, there's no treatments, nothing to slow or halt the progression, no clinical trials in sight. At least with HD, we have hope, and we are able to be a part of clinical trials. The JHD community is left in the dark with no voice. I would like to thank all members of our FDA for being with us today and coming out and hearing the stories. Finally, our children have a voice. So these are today's session goals. Today, we'd like the FDA to have a greater understanding of JHD, to provide the FDA with patient perspective of JHD when considering regulatory decisions. We'd like to help the FDA understand the risks that parents are willing and not willing to take when it comes to their children participating in clinical trials. We'd like you to understand JHD symptoms better, the difference between JHD and adult onset HD, and the symptoms even that differ in siblings. We want you to understand the most burdensome symptoms of JHD, how parents feel about the lack of clinical trials available for their children. And then I think the most important is to understand that hopefully you guys consider HD a broad spectrum disease, and that if a drug is approved for adults living with HD, that hopefully it could be approved for children as well. We do understand there's compassionate use pathways and people use things off label, but we also understand that often compassionate use pathways are unsuccessful and parents actually do not get access to clinical trials or approved drugs. And if they're off label, insurance companies don't have to pay for those therapies or drugs for children. So our hope is that you understand how important an adult drug is approved for children too. So we just take some of the burden off the families for them to have to get those therapies and drugs. We also are going to talk a little bit about placebo and how we really hope that you truly understand that having a placebo trial in something like JHD is almost cruel, and that we think that children can be their own controls. The disease is so rapid as far as its progression. So hopefully the FDA would consider not having a placebo group in clinical trials for juvenile Huntington's disease. But most of all in this, approving these drugs for children as well for use. We did run a survey and we had over 20 questions. At this time, we have 59 people that have taken the survey. This is all in your pre-session materials. As you can see, we had 56 participants take part in this survey at the time that the pre-session materials were turned into the FDA. 83% said that they would participate in a gene therapy trial. 86 inherited JHD from their father, and 90% of people said they would participate in a clinical trial if one was available to them. And we also have symptoms here, and you can see some of the symptoms that were reported by families. This goes into more detail in your pre-session materials, and we actually even have verbatims and a whole bunch of information that was submitted to you guys. This survey is remaining open for the FDA for families to still continue to come in and take the survey, and for us to continue to collect information that can help the FDA for the future. These are HD organizations that send their report. All of these statements of support are in your pre-session materials. And I would like to bring on Melissa to start our presentations from the parents to talk about her daughter, Ava.
Hello. I refer to myself and the other mothers you will hear today as the reluctant experts. My story varies slightly from the other ladies due to the fact that both my husband and my daughter are battling Huntington's disease. While they both have the diagnosis of Huntington's disease, the disease itself manifests quite differently in each of them, with me as the caregiver being tasked with how to care and manage both of their very different symptoms. Progression in juvenile Huntington's disease is extremely rapid as compared to adult onset Huntington's. My daughter Ava is only 15 years old. I've had to watch her slowly lose all of her abilities. I still have a video of when she learned to ride her bike independently at age 9. Little did I know that would be the only time I would ever get to see it due to her muscle deterioration and progressing feet deformities. Both of these things cause her pain and make walking extremely difficult. My husband, Michael, as an adult, still has the capacity to understand what is going on with his disease progression. Nearly every day, Ava asks me why her body is changing, why she can no longer do the things that she once could, not only physically, but mentally. Ava, sadly, due to juvenile Huntington's, has transitioned to a life skills classroom at school due to her cognitive decline and impairments. She once thrived at reading and spelling. School is now especially hard for Ava, not only because of academics, but also psychologically, because she sees the peers that she once used to play and socialize with years ago, who no longer want to interact with her. She simply cannot keep up with them vocally or physically. I remember recently she began crying, asking me why her eyes no longer blink and move as they used to. She looked in the mirror and referred to herself as a freak because of this. How, as a mother, I ask you, and her protector, do I answer this question truthfully while not frightening her? In these moments, my mind races and I try to come up with the best possible answers for her, all while fighting the urge to crumble into a million pieces onto the floor. The answers that we as JHD caregivers can give are few and far between. She experiences painful neuropathy with itching on her back, legs, and feet. After 2 visits to the emergency room and 4 doctor's visits, we still have no answers. All the while with medical doctors and clinicians wanting to meet this medical marvel, which is my daughter with juvenile Huntington's disease. Due to the lack of awareness and knowledge of JHD, we often felt like guinea pigs as they studied her with a furrowed brow, wondering what they could say to appease us so that they could simply send us on our way. That being said, we have taken to exploring off-label supplements such as mushrooms and tinctures for treatments and therapies that we're willing to try anything to relieve her symptoms since we have no other options. My husband has chorea while Ava experiences tremors. She has lost her ability to write, draw, and color, all of which used to bring her great joy. She loved making cards for everyone in our family. I have saved many of them to cherish. The main symptoms of juvenile Huntington's that affect Ava's quality of life the most are her speech. Ava no longer has the ability to vocalize why she was upset or in pain. She will cry out of frustration because she cannot get up out of the chair or off the toilet. Her speech is slow and delayed. We are currently doing voice banking with speech pathology to record her voice that remains. Although as a typical teenager, she prefers hearing the robot say her things on her iPad because it makes her laugh. My husband's speech has only slightly been affected by Huntington's, and he experiences no physical pain. With walking, Ava walks with assistance, short distances only. When we are outside of our home now, she has to use a wheelchair. My husband is still able to walk independently. Ava requires help with eating and struggles with dysphagia and choking at every meal. Ava can no longer dress herself, manage bathing, or her feminine hygiene needs, which causes her a lot of embarrassment. She cannot clean herself properly after using the bathroom in order to prevent infections. My husband, Michael, thankfully is still able to manage his ADLs independently. I would like to thank all of you for listening to our stories today. And my hope coming out of this meeting is just that, to have hope. Because you see, with every birthday that Ava has, I know in my heart that I am one step closer to losing her. I don't want to think about the future without my daughter in it. I will never see her get married or have children of her own. I will eventually not hear her be able to say the words, "I love you, mommy." I have to face every day knowing that I have to bear witness to her rapidly becoming a prisoner in her own body. In closing, I would like to express just how much I'd be willing to take a chance on having the opportunity to have my daughter Ava participate in clinical trials, if that means the potential outcome of a longer time here, or even sadly, the alternative. Because you see, we as JHD moms have nothing to lose. The brutal end stages of juvenile Huntington's disease are nothing that we want our children to suffer from. And if that means losing Ava sooner, knowing that I've done everything possible for not only her, but for the future children that sadly will be impacted by juvenile Huntington's disease, then so be it. Because again, as the reluctant experts, our children's lives depend on us, and most importantly, they depend on you. Thank you so much. And I would like to now introduce you to Angie D'Alba to share her story with all of you.
Hi, my name is Angie. I am the mother of Dominic and Harley. They were both diagnosed at the age of 11. Harley is now 16, Dominic is 12. Harley's CAG is 57, Dominic's is 65. Their father is at the end stages of Huntington's. Harley's symptoms began at the age of 8. He was misdiagnosed with attention deficit. He was very clumsy, very odd, wouldn't wear underwears, very special, I guess you can say. Dominic, from the beginning, when he started school, he started being very antisocial, from being a very cheerful child to just being diagnosed with autism when he could actually read at 3. And this was all about the age of 4. Harley has been admitted to the psychiatric hospital for cutting himself, trying to look for veins, not trying to kill himself. Harley always hallucinates and imagines things that are not there. Harley's solution to things could be sometimes very awful. For example, his dad has a lot of chorea, and one of his solutions was to cut his arms and his legs off, and that would stop the noise. Another thing, Harley's memory, he's losing it. He tends to ask 3 to 4 times a day, "What day is it?" or "What time is it?" Will come to the kitchen and ask me, "Where's my mom?" Harley will go 2 to 3 days without sleeping and then sleep for 4 to 6 hours, and then he's up again. Harley was having multiple absent seizures. Now he's having full seizures. Dominic's symptoms are pain. He has lots of pain in the arms, legs, and head. About 90% of the time, medication does not work for him. He is now full-time wheelchair bound at school. Due to his knees locking and giving up, he will fall forward and has had a few falls. Due to Dominic's antisocial withdrawal, he sometimes also starts to pull out his hair and doesn't know what to do. And that's when he self-harms. Everything needs to be told to Dominic in advance for anything to happen. If any changes happen, that will start the anxiety, and he will start scratching himself or others to the point where he will make himself bleed or cut into others people's arms, whatever he can get his hands on. His mood swings are always horrible. We're always walking on eggshells. Not sure if we are even able to ask him if he wants to eat or not, because that could trigger one of his mood swings and then he could just go off. Risks that I am willing to take. I am willing to take every risk you can. I'm willing to do brain surgery, biologics, therapies, travel. I'm willing to travel to other countries. My kids come from a family of 12 people suffering from Huntington's disease, 5 of them being young children. The highest CAG of these kids is 125. The child is only 2. We are willing to do anything. As time goes by, the family just gets bigger, and unfortunately, we keep breeding due to misinformation. And we are just having more kids that are sicker and sicker. I now introduce you to Erica.
Hi, my name is Erica, and my daughter Olivia was diagnosed with juvenile Huntington's at the age of 12 with a CAG of 78. Her symptoms started at the age of 11. Her father passed away 3 years ago at the age of 47 from Huntington's disease. I have decided to talk about dystonia, which affects Olivia's quality of life. It is the greatest impact we are dealing with. Her current treatments of medicine are baclofen and trihexyphenidyl, which are used to treat the muscle spasms and tightness that she has in her neck, hands, and left side of her body. She also receives Botox injections every 3 months, which wears off at about 2 months. We use a CBD balm a few times a day to help aid in the pain. All of these are just temporary relief. Olivia experiences falls because she can't see where she is going due to the dystonia, which turned her head and neck to the left side of her body. She has trouble swallowing and chewing and can't eat her favorite foods anymore, like popcorn and Skittles. She is mostly G-tube fed. She has cried numerous times because she can't eat what she likes and has asked, why did this happen to me? As her mother, my heart was broken. Her speech is severely impaired and people have difficulty understanding her. Juvenile Huntington's disease has greatly impacted Olivia's social life. Since she was very young, she was a social butterfly where I couldn't keep up with her social calendar. She was in dance, on the neighborhood swim team, countless play dates, and birthday parties. Now my daughter can no longer do any of these things and isn't invited anymore. Her typical peers are embarrassed of her due to her speech and how she looks. At the age of 16, Olivia should be driving a car, spending time with friends, and dating. I am her only friend. The friends she does have are when we attend HD conferences and she gets to interact with the other JHD children. During her middle school years, she has been made fun of, laughed at, and another kid even talked about raping her due to her vulnerability. She can't defend herself and would be an easy target. She was moved to a charter school at the start of high school. She is no longer bullied, but ignored and not invited to events. She is losing all her cognition to learn and retain information. She has now been placed in the extended course content where she will receive a participation certificate instead of a diploma. Olivia enjoys walking and being like everyone else. However, I'm using a wheelchair more often for her since walking straight and for a longer distance has become impossible. Eventually, she will lose all mobility, which brings on more pain and will lose another part of her independence. Normal is gone for her. Her dreams of becoming a marine biologist no longer exist, along with getting married and having children. She is in physical therapy where she gets to ride and take care of a horse every week. This is the highlight of her life. Someday she will no longer be able to do that. If a treatment or therapy is approved for adult onset HD, could there be a way that the approval be for broad spectrum HD, JOHD, prodromal, and adult onset to eliminate years of delay of these subpopulations to get access? I also have a 21-year-old son at risk. I may become a caregiver for about 40 years of my life. This disease is taking away my family. It took my husband 3 years ago, taking my daughter and potentially my son, leaving me all alone with no family left. As a mother, I will do anything for my kids and I'm willing to participate in any clinical trials, anything that could help slow the progression of this terrible disease. Thank you for this opportunity. Now I would like to introduce you to Jen Narrett.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Narrett. My beautiful daughter, Aaliyah, was diagnosed with JHD at the age of 11. Now she is 19. I had no idea this disease ran on her dad's side of the family. When she was diagnosed, I knew the disease was bad, but I had no idea what it actually meant for her and our family. Aaliyah started showing symptoms of JHD at the age of 4. Her behavior was out of control to the point she was kicked out of her daycare. Her teacher called me concerned on the first day of kindergarten. She was hyper, defiant, destructive, and impulsive. Aaliyah's CAG is 74, and her father, Darnell, passed away from Huntington's at the age of 41. JHD has impacted Aaliyah in several different ways. She has always been very smart. She met all of her milestones, but then around first grade, her cognitive abilities seemed to be at a standstill. New information wasn't registering, and she was steadily regressing over the years. In high school, she was in a small special needs class working only on her life skills, but she would never need them. At this time, she doesn't have much to say, and she only goes to school for social interaction. There are no medications out there, period, to help my child with her cognitive decline. No therapies have helped. She is still unable to learn new information and is continuing to lose information she has always known. This disease also caused certain behaviors, and Aaliyah was labeled as the naughty kid. She had some friends in kindergarten, and eventually she was being judged by everyone, even our family. She was left out of a lot of activities. I felt the social discord at school functions. People would treat us differently. No one has maintained a friendship with Aaliyah since early elementary, and no one checks up to see how she's doing. Peers from elementary school will walk right past her and not acknowledge her at all. All she has is her family. Aaliyah was 10 when she started falling for no reason, and since then she has had many bruises, scrapes, and stitches. It got to the point she was falling 3 times a week. She needed assistance to walk in her own house. Aaliyah stopped walking and feeding herself a month before she turned 18. She can't get into the bathtub or use the toilet anymore. She is so weak, she cannot hold herself up in her wheelchair. She slides out of her wheelchair on the bus and in our van, and it's very dangerous. She has a G-tube now because she can barely eat by mouth due to her muscle weakness. It takes her a long time to swallow, and she is a choking hazard. Aaliyah's dystonia has also progressed. Now her hands are clenched tight all the time. She cannot open her fingers, it's too painful. Her arms don't have much range of motion anymore, and she has spasms all over. I have to massage her legs at night until she falls asleep. She's on a ridiculous amount of meds to help her with her pain, sleep, seizures, involuntary movements, and dystonia, but yet she is still in pain, kicking her legs and herself out of her bed, and she can't help it. She wakes up multiple times a night screaming due to her pain. Aaliyah has experienced increased agitation and depression over time. It is also very inconsistent. One day she can be happy and easygoing, and the next day she'll wake up screaming and crying. There is no way to tell what is wrong. This happens in addition to being on antidepressants. Aaliyah's speech has been impaired since she was 7. Her speech slowly declined over the years, despite ongoing therapy in multiple settings. Now her main caregivers can barely understand her. You have to know what she likes and the history of conversations to figure out what she wants. This goes hand in hand with agitation and irritability. I can't imagine how frustrating it must be to know what you want to say, but it comes out garbled and no one can help you. Aaliyah has also suffered from sensory symptoms. Tags on clothes and the color black have always bothered her. No one is allowed to wear black, even her. She says it hurts her eyes. She has meltdowns until you change your clothes. I took her to the eye doctor twice with full testing and they found nothing wrong. Aaliyah is also very sensitive to any kind of light, even sunlight. Sunglasses are the only solution that calm her down. She wears them everywhere. At home, we spend a lot of time sitting in the dark. Aaliyah also doesn't know how sick she really is. One of her favorite things to do is go to our state fair for the rides. The summer after she stopped walking, I told her we were going to go to the fair, that we were going to eat all the foods, have so much fun, and see the shows, but we can't go on rides this time. She looked at me and said, why not? She didn't understand what was happening to her body. Her mind was still in a state of being able to do everything she could do before, even though she hadn't been walking for 8 months. JHD has affected our family tremendously. Aaliyah has 2 sisters. One has a 50% risk of having JHD. The other, my youngest daughter, Rhiannon, is watching her sister deteriorate right in front of her. She's only 6. She struggles with jealousy because Aaliyah requires a lot of attention. She also struggles with the slow loss of her big sister. She draws pictures and speaks about how Aaliyah used to play with her, and now she lays in bed all day. There are so many things that are forever lost. Aaliyah was always curious about driving and was excited to one day drive herself, not realizing she would never get the chance to try. Aaliyah will never experience going on a date, having her first kiss, or having a boyfriend. Both experiences of college and becoming a teacher have been ripped away from her because of this cruel disease. She will never get married. Aaliyah has always been in love with the idea of falling in love, getting married, and living happily ever after. She will never get to experience any of these milestones. She no longer enjoys or can do the things she loved: swim, travel, movies, roller skating, and playing with her friends. All of her abilities have been taken away by JHD and has left Aaliyah with nothing. All she can do for fun now is lay in the bed and stare at the TV. She can't even eat her favorite foods anymore. Every day I mourn my daughter and who she would be today if JHD wasn't infesting her body. I wonder what she would look like and be like. Would her hair be bouncy like it used to and not matted down from being in the bed all the time? Would we have endless mother and daughter conversations instead of me having to baby talk to her so she understands me? Would her smile light up the room even more than it does today? Because right now it hurts her to smile. Her muscles are. Would she be dating anyone? What college would she have picked? And would she indeed go to be a teacher? I will never know. We can't continue to sit back and watch these children die. Our kids deserve a fighting chance. Please help make a change today. Thank you for your time today, and I turn it over to Natalie Salazar.
Good afternoon. My name is Natalie Salazar, and this is my beautiful family. My 2-year-old daughter, Ari, my fiance and the girl's dad, Hector, and finally, the reason I get to speak to you all, my sweet little girl, Chloe. Chloe was diagnosed with juvenile Huntington's disease at the age of 4. Chloe started showing symptoms at the age of 2. Her CAG is 115, and Hector nor I have no symptoms of Huntington's disease. Chloe first started having seizures last May and has had an increased amount since then. I can remember very clearly that day it first happened. I have never felt so helpless than at that moment. I was horrified to see my daughter just seize up and start jerking as her body turned purple from lack of oxygen, just trying to gasp for air. The ambulance came and we were admitted in the hospital. She ended up having more while waiting to be admitted. And what was so frustrating was that these doctors and nurses had no clue what to do because they didn't know what Huntington's fully was. Chloe was failed. She wasn't left with a game plan nor emergency medicines. I remember leaving the hospital scared to death because we were unsure if this was going to be our new normal. And unfortunately enough, that's what it was. From that moment on, the seizures were coming left and right. If not every day, then it was every other day. We must watch my daughter's body convulse, gasping for air each time. Her bones look like they're on the verge of breaking through her skin. And I just sit there and I try to console my daughter. And I'm trying to speak it into existence for the seizures to stop. And I'm telling her she'll be all right and how she is a supergirl. And in all reality, I'm timing it, waiting for that 5-minute mark to come so I can prepare to give that emergency medicine that took months to get. I'm telling her she's going to be okay, but really I'm just praying and hoping she makes it out of that seizure. My daughter doesn't wake up to the birds chirping in the morning or by mommy waking her up softly. She is awakened by early morning seizures where her body is just thrashing on the bed, where she is shaking uncontrollably as her body is just cramping up all at once. That is how we start every morning. The seizures used to be 1 every time she had one. Now she's having up to 3 in a day that are lasting 4 minutes long each time. And all I can do is be there by her side. And once it's done, I grab her and I hold her limp body that seems so lifeless. Her body becomes so weak and her eyes filled with tears. And sometimes she's not able to control her bowel movements and soils herself. And though she's little, her pride is crushed and is embarrassed as I clean her up. The seizures have taken over our daily lives, always unsure when the next one is, and it stops us from going anywhere or doing anything. Chloe is on 4 different medications that are supposed to help with seizures, and none are clearly working, no matter how many times we have upped the dosage. The days and nights always seem to run together, and Chloe is never getting enough sleep. Her constant tremors and shaking will make her so uncomfortable and will cause for long nights into early morning seizures. It's a constant circle, wake up and repeat. Her shaking is something I can never manage. Her screaming and pleading for help as she knows she is shaking. And I, a grown adult, at times have to put my whole body weight to try and stop the shaking. When Chloe was able to walk, her shaking and tremors would disrupt her everyday routine. She would shake so badly that she wasn't able to stand or walk for long. The little stuff we take for granted, just as simple as getting a drink or feeding herself, was all changed because her tremors would not allow her to do so any longer. Chloe was so independent and strong-willed, and she would get mad if I'd help, but as a mother, it would break my heart to see her struggle and to just keep going. She always had a lot of determination. There was a long period of time last year where Chloe would complain of itching, mainly behind the legs, and those were probably the worst nights I would have with Chloe. I would give her a hot bath to try and soothe her body. I tried every cream that doctors or the other moms may have suggested, and once again, nothing helped her work. When she would itch, her body would shake, sending her legs up in the air, and Chloe would be crying and screaming, asking for help. And all I could do is try my best to rub her and try to calm her down. Chloe would eventually wear herself out and cry herself to sleep. The itching would come and go, and I wish there was an explanation. But as always, there are unanswered questions when it comes to juvenile Huntington's. This disease is a thief in the night. My daughter was diagnosed in October of 2020, not even a full 3 years since she's been diagnosed. Today, my daughter is bedbound and can barely hold herself up. She can no longer stand, crawl, or walk. This disease has stripped her away of being a normal 7-year-old. Her mobility has been affected since before she was diagnosed. I see my daughter's frustration as she watches her little cousins or other kids play. I see her body just deteriorating right before our eyes. I miss the sight of seeing my daughter run to me. I'm left with the decision to put my daughter under surgery to input the G tube because my daughter is no longer able to retain the right nutrients. Her ability to swallow exhausts her, and I have to decide if I'm wanting to put her body through that to even see if it will prolong her life, knowing that ultimately my daughter is going to die from starvation or because she'll aspirate and it could cause pneumonia. Unfortunately, I feel like I failed my daughter as we are entering into the end stages, but I have to remind myself I still have a 2-year-old daughter who is at risk, and though it's too late for my sweet Chloe, I speak in front of you today asking for a change. I'll keep fighting and I'll keep advocating because our kids need this. We don't have any more time to waste. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to have a chance for my babies to live. The video I'll be showing is my daughter Chloe not throwing a tantrum, but the excruciating pain she endures every day. This is how she is even after all the medicine is given.
Okay, baby. Get out of it, baby. There you go.
You're okay, calm down. Come on. Thank you for your time, and now I'd like to bring on London Tabor.
I'd like to start by thanking the FDA and Help for HD for giving me this opportunity. My name is London, and I am the mother of an amazing, beautiful, inspiring, sweet, loving young woman named Autumn. Autumn is 16 years old, almost 17, and she's battling juvenile Huntington's disease. Autumn's the youngest of my 3 children and my only daughter. Autumn has 2 brothers, Logan, who's 19, and Dakota, who's 21. As by now, this disease is genetic. Autumn inherited this disease from her father, Justin, who passed away in 2018, just a month after he turned 36 years old. My son, Logan, is also at risk of inheriting Huntington's disease, but as of today, he's not symptomatic, and all we can do is have hope that he never starts showing symptoms. My oldest son, Dakota, has a different father, so thankfully he's not at risk, but over the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you as much as I can about my amazing daughter, Autumn, the good, the bad, and the unimaginable. When Autumn was born, I was so happy. I love my boys with all my heart, but I always dreamed of having a little girl. I can still remember the day that I went in for an ultrasound and they asked me if I wanted to know the baby's gender. And of course I did, but instead of telling me, she typed it on the screen and she typed, "It's a girl." Tears of absolute joy started streaming down my face. I was so happy. The first 10 years of Autumn's life, she was a normal kid. She loved school and she got good grades. She made friends easily anywhere she could. She always had a real soft spot for all animals, especially dogs. Autumn has always been drawn to people in need. If you get a cut, Autumn will be the first one to bandage you up. She loves being a girly girl, dancing and singing, and she was always so good at remembering all the lyrics to songs. Autumn was such an adorable, happy little girl. She was funny too. When she was about 5 years old, we were in the paint department at Walmart, and on the back wall it said, "Do it yourself." Autumn looks at the wall, she reads it out loud, and she says, "Do it yourself? How rude." Raising Autumn and watching her grow up was an absolute joy. And as any parent thinks about, I always wondered what type of woman she'd grow up to be. Would she be a veterinarian, a nurse, a doctor, a teacher, a singer, a comedian, an NFL cheerleader? Would she be like me? She had so many passions and excelled at everything she did. It was fun and exciting to daydream about the woman that my beautiful little girl would someday become. But those daydreams would soon be interrupted by my worst nightmares. When Autumn was in 5th grade, she started having abnormal behavior changes at home. Outbursts and aggression for no reason, and then it would be over as quick as it started. This was not like her, and it started happening more and more frequently. I was worried, so I took Autumn to the doctor, and she was diagnosed with ADHD and prescribed medication, but the medication didn't seem to help. Now, at the time, I knew that Logan and Autumn had a 50% chance of inheriting Huntington's disease from their dad. And as time went by and the aggressive behaviors got worse, I started doing more research on Huntington's disease, leading me to research juvenile Huntington's disease. I had known that juvenile Huntington's disease was a possibility, but I also knew that juvenile Huntington's disease was super rare. I thought and hoped that I was just worrying too much. I wanted to be wrong, but in my mind, I told myself, it's not JHD. Autumn's just going through something, probably puberty. It's not JHD. It can't be. But by 6th grade in late 2017, she was not only having behavior problems at home, but now I was getting calls from the school. It was little things, Autumn being defiant, refusing to do work, interrupting the class, etc. And on top of that, her grades were slipping. And when I compared her handwriting from that time to a paper that she had written when she's in 1st grade, I was shocked. The handwriting was a completely different person. This is known as regression. I knew that my daughter needed help in school, but I also knew that if she was experiencing the earliest symptoms of juvenile Huntington's disease, then the help that she needed was on a whole different level, and her needs would be changing as this disease progressed. In January of 2018, our worst fears were confirmed, and at just 11 years old, Autumn was diagnosed with juvenile Huntington's disease with a CAG repeat of 72. She was put on an IEP immediately following her diagnosis, and we're grateful for all the help and support the school has continued to provide. When Autumn was diagnosed, my world quite literally fell apart. I was and still am in the deepest depression of my life. JHD is the absolute worst form of the worst disease known to man, and it progresses up to 5 times faster in kids than it does in adults with the disease. I was so scared and sad and heartbroken, I was completely numb. Within 10 years, I had watched this disease slowly rob Justin, Autumn's father, of the person he once was, and that was heartbreaking enough. And now to find out that my sweet, innocent child is going to go through the same thing, only faster and younger, I was absolutely horrified. Clinical trials had been going on for a few years at this point, and I had done research a while back to see if we could get Justin into a clinical trial. But unfortunately, the disease had progressed too far for him to be eligible. But Autumn, on the other hand, one of my first thoughts after finding out she had JHD was, Autumn's in early stages of JHD, so I'll see which clinical trial I can get her into. But when I went through each trial, they all excluded juvenile Huntington's disease for various criteria: age, CAG repeat, symptoms. I understand the risks. I understand that these treatments are experimental and there's a possibility that these treatments may not work. I understand that some of these trials require travel. I understand all of the risks, But the bottom line is their clock is ticking. My daughter is dying. Our children are getting worse with each day that passes, and a clinical trial is the only chance at the possibility of saving their life. Pharma is worried that because they're children, their brains are still growing, and it's possible that a clinical trial may have irreversible effects on their growing brains. But what they're forgetting is that each day that goes by, there is and will continue to be irreversible damage to their brains. This is why we would do anything to give our kids a chance at life. Wouldn't any parent? I spent months hiding in my bedroom, watching videos, doing research on the internet to figure out some way, any way to get my daughter into a clinical trial. I looked into compassionate use, right to try, but the bottom line was the only way to get that these kids would be allowed in clinical trials is if the FDA and pharma were in agreement together. I wish I had this opportunity to speak with you 5 years ago when my daughter was in early stages of this disease. But I always knew that no matter what the drug companies said, I would never stop advocating for these JHD kids to be allowed in clinical trials. In the back of my head, I know that chances are by the time a cure or treatment is found, it'll be too late for my daughter. And this is a rare disease, but rare diseases deserve a voice too. And we're just a handful of the many families out there who would do anything to give their kids a chance at life. Our community is begging you to allow all ages of JHD kids in clinical trials. And now I'd like to introduce you to Holly, the last mother that you'll hear from today.
My name's Holly. I'm here to talk about my daughter, Bella. She was diagnosed at 10 years old with juvenile Huntington's disease with a CAG of 74. Bella inherited Huntington's disease from her father, who's currently 44 and living with HD. The symptoms that impact Bella on a daily basis impact her quality of life. She suffers with depression, social withdrawal, and apathy. When she was first diagnosed with JHD, her first symptom was depression, and she was started on Prozac at 10 years old, even before her HD diagnosis had been confirmed. And just a couple years earlier, she'd been happy, vibrant, spunky, and the leader of the pack in her friend group, and now no longer had any interest in seeing or talking to her friends. She would spend hours in her room alone with no interest in doing anything else, and you'd be hard-pressed to see her smile about anything. At first, we tried to tell ourselves it was hormones, but it was much more than that. At 12 years old, after having been on Prozac for a couple of years, Bella got a knife and tried to cut her wrists. It was an impulsive and apathetic action. She didn't necessarily want to die, but it seemed better than cleaning her room. She had no real thoughts about it then and still doesn't today. She doesn't see it as a big deal, and tomorrow she can take it or leave it. These days, she's less depressed and more apathetic. There's very little she'll get excited about or really interested in. She's had a lot of cognitive loss as well. She was a straight A student and math came very easily to her, and she was consistently in the top of her class. She used to tell me that she had a math brain. Eventually, learning new concepts was too hard, and when she was 11 or 12, she told me she was stupid. It broke my heart. She's not stupid. It's this disease taking everything away from her. She's slow to respond to questions. She doesn't retain information, sometimes even for just a couple of minutes. Even if someone greets her, it can take a long time for her to register the hello and then come up with her own hello. The biggest effect lately is her swallowing and her speech. HD and JHD affect every muscle in the body, and it includes your tongue. So swallowing becomes harder and harder. The effects of eating and drinking and even speaking. Bella uses a straw to get small sips of liquid to help prevent it from slipping down her throat and into her lungs. She's still eating regular food, but at 16 years old, I'm back to cutting her food up like she's a toddler so she doesn't choke on it. And meals can easily take 90 minutes to complete. She regularly chokes or gets food stuck in her throat that she's unable to dislodge. Now we have what's called a dechoker, and it's used to help clear her throat when she has a problem. It's like a reverse plunger. Doesn't always work. It can turn into a 30 to 60-minute ordeal of using it over and over, along with other tactics while she's in pain and gagging and crying. Her speech is also very faint, extremely difficult to understand, and very slow. Oftentimes she just doesn't speak at all, or she'll ask me to explain things or tell stories for her. Her fine motor skills are also affected. One of the first physical changes for Bella was the loss of her ability to write. Fine motor skills deteriorate before walking or any of the more noticeable physical changes. She has a hard time even holding onto a pencil. Her writing is very faint because her grip is slight. Her writing is very slow, and she's very focused when writing. It looks like she's using her entire body, and the results look more like the writing of a kindergartner. This also affects her ability to feed herself, hold silverware, prepare food, open jars or bags, hold her toothbrush, or even hold her hairbrush. When my daughter Bella was diagnosed with juvenile onset Huntington's disease in June of 2017, she was 10, and I was obviously devastated. Once the initial horror wore off and I was able to remotely face life again, I was frantic. I was desperately calling and emailing anyone I could find, doctors, researchers, pharmaceutical companies, anyone that might be able to point me in the right direction for a cure or a treatment. It's such a hopeless feeling to know that this awful, debilitating disease is coming for your precious baby, and you can't do anything about it. I started reading every article I could find online that had to do with HD or JHD treatment. I had to become an expert and fight for her because no one else was. I researched what treatments were in trials and reviewed all the admission criteria, only to find that in every single trial, the participant needed to be at least 18 years old. And by this time, Bella was only 11. I began calling and emailing anyone I could find that had ties to the HD community, begging for help. I was researching other countries to see if I could find a country that had treatments available that hadn't been approved in the US, or that may be doing trials that allowed children. I was willing to pick up my family and go anywhere, willing to submit to anything that seemed hopeful. Surgery, pills, gene therapy, anything, and it was exhausting. Everywhere I turned, I came up empty-handed. I was shocked, knowing that JHD progresses so much faster than adult HD. I thought there would be more pressure and urgency to get these children some sort of help. Instead, I learned that trials focus on adults, and if a treatment was found, it would take years to come to market. We don't necessarily have years. Not only that, once a treatment's made available to adults with HD, it might still not be available to children with JHD because it hadn't been tested on children. I turned to the FDA website at one point and researched expanded access and compassionate use and read the guidelines. It sounded like JHD met the criteria, being as it's 1, a fatal disease, 2, no known cure or treatment. And Bella was a candidate because 3, she's not possible for her to participate in any clinical trials. And even bigger, number 4, the potential risks of any treatment seem minor in comparison to any benefit she might get. I thought I finally found something. I spoke with her neurologist at the time, and although he assured me he would help me in any way, ultimately he was not interested in putting forth the effort to pursue a claim for expanded access. The final piece of the expanded access puzzle is number 5, that pharmaceutical companies get the final say whether they'll allow patient access to their treatment. And so far, the companies with trials weren't even allowing expanded access for adults. And all of my attempts to reach out to these companies went unanswered. In March 2022, I was listening to an HD seminar, and a speaker with a pharma company mentioned that their new treatment would be open to expanded access. It was actually a bullet point in their presentation, and I was so excited. At this point, Bella was being seen by the UC Davis HD clinic, and I immediately messaged to her doctor with the information from the presentation, and she assured me that she was going to follow up on this diligently and to the best of her ability. She reached out to the company and ended up meeting with them in person in April of 2022. All that she was able to communicate to me after that meeting was that we needed to wait a few months and we'd know more. So far, I haven't heard anything. The biggest tragedy is if a treatment to slow progression of this disease is approved for adults, but requires an additional trial for kids, because these kids need access to anything that can possibly help them. An additional trial can mean another 3 to 5 year wait, and these kids don't have that amount of time. Putting them through a trial and possibly giving them placebo would be devastating, to say the least. Off-label and compassionate use are avenues to the treatment, but at the end of the day, insurance likely wouldn't cover the high cost of the drug, and we'd be stuck on the sidelines again with no real access to get a drug or treatment our kids so desperately need. Obviously, the best case scenario would be if the kids are approved with the adults. And if that's not possible, allow them to participate in an after drug approval study. They could avoid placebo. Insurance could potentially cover the cost of the drug. And since this disease is so fast moving in these kids, we'd see if the drug is working. There's no cure, no therapy, nothing to slow or stop this disease. My hope for this session is that someone will listen to our pleas for help. Someone will hear us, and hopefully someone will help us save our children. Thank you.
So what you guys heard today is what the FDA heard just a minute ago. And so let's hope that this is a start for some change. And for the community that's watching this, you saw the fight today. For industry, we need your help too. Because even if we talk to the FDA and the FDA has a greater understanding of JHD, without you putting in pediatrics to your trials, we will never see clinical trials for children. Without you putting into the FDA asking for compassionate use or the pathways, or for you asking the FDA if your drug is approved to have it approved for children. Even if that means you have to follow the children for 3 to 5 years and watch to see if it's working, please ask the FDA if the children can have access to the drugs too. If it is proven safe and effective for the adults, why should the children not have access to it? They should. So maybe we can find a solution here. Maybe the children get access to the drugs that are approved for adults. And then maybe we just have a little bit longer study that follows the children to prove efficacy and safety. And that could be done without placebo. And that could be done, I think, if we all work together. For us to save these children, it's going to take regulatory and it's going to take industry. And let's hope one day these women today are the miracle workers that have changed history and will start us all working together for our children. Thank you.